Hey guys, tonight we find ourselves standing on the edge of a high-altitude desert, a place where the air is so thin and dry, it feels like it might crack if you spoke too loudly. You feel the grit of the alkaline dust beneath the thick rubber soles of your boots, a fine, powdery resistance that gives way with a rhythmic, muted crunch as you begin to walk. The sun has been gone for hours, leaving behind a sky that is less of a black void and more of a deep, bruised violet, stretching out toward an infinite horizon. There is no moisture here to soften the edges of the world. Everything is sharp, crystalline, and indifferent. You pull your jacket a little tighter against your chest, feeling the coarse weave of the fabric against your fingertips. The cold is a physical presence here, a slow, creeping weight that settles on your shoulders, but it isn't biting. It is a clean, antiseptic chill that smells faintly of dry sage and the ghost of rain that fell 3 counties away. You breathe in deeply, feeling the air move through your nostrils, cold and sharp, like inhaling silver. It tastes of nothing, which is a rarity in a world usually cluttered with the sense of exhaust and heavy dampness. In the distance, the silhouette of the data center begins to resolve against the starlight. It doesn't look like a building so much as a geological feature, a massive, low-slung slab of concrete and corrugated steel that seems to have grown directly out of the hard-packed earth. It is a monolith of human intent, a brutalist anchor in the middle of this emptiness. You notice the way the moonlight, distant and indifferent, slides off the metallic surfaces of the exterior, creating long, pale streaks that look like frozen lightning. There are no windows, no decorative flourishes, no concessions made to the aesthetic whims of the people who built it. It is a structure designed for heat dissipation and security, a fortress for the ethereal. As you get closer, the silence of the desert begins to change. It isn't that it gets louder, exactly. It's that the quality of the stillness shifts. You start to feel a subtle pressure in your inner ear, a phantom weight that suggests a massive amount of energy is being moved nearby. You stop for a moment, standing perfectly still, and you realize you aren't just hearing a sound, you are feeling a frequency. It's a low-octave vibration that travels up through the soles of your boots, vibrating the small bones in your feet before climbing into your shins. It is the hum. It is a sound that shouldn't exist out here, miles from the nearest city. It is the collective drone of 100,000 cooling fans, spinning in a synchronized mechanical ballet to keep the silicon brains of the world from melting under the heat of their own logic. You find yourself walking toward it, drawn by the strange, hypnotic constancy of the noise. It's a bit absurd, isn't it? All this infrastructure, all this concrete and copper and refined sand, just to ensure that a digital memory of a stranger's breakfast or a billion lines of banking code remain accessible at 3 in the morning. The smell changes as you reach the outer perimeter fence. The sage and dust are replaced by something metallic sharp, the scent of ionized air, and the faint, ozone-heavy tang of a massive electrical substation. It smells like a thunderstorm that never quite breaks. You reach out and touch the chain-link fence, the cold metal biting into your palm, and you can feel the wire vibrating. The whole earth seems to be purring. It's a rhythmic, steady pulse that bypasses your ears and speaks directly to your ribcage. It is the sound of the modern world's nervous system, tucked away in the dark, where no one has to look at it. You follow the line of the fence, your shadow stretching out long and thin across the salt flats. The blue security lights atop the perimeter poles blink with a slow, unfeeling precision, casting a pale, underwater glow over the scrub brush. You look up at the sheer walls of the data center, realizing that inside those walls, millions of tiny lights are flickering in a language of ones and zeros, processing the history of the present moment. But out here, there is only you, the cold air, and the overwhelming, beautiful monotony of the hum. It is a lullaby of physics and engineering, a steady, unchanging drone that promises that as long as the fans are spinning, the world is still functioning. You close your eyes for a second, letting the vibration settle into your bones, feeling the heavy, grounding weight of the machine's breath as it exhales its heat into the desert night. You take another step forward, moving deeper into the resonance, leaving the silence of the natural world behind for the more reliable, more permanent sound of the great data centers. The heavy, reinforced glass of the outer door yields to your touch with a pressurized sigh, a sound like a giant drawing in a long, measured breath. As you step over the threshold, the transition is immediate and absolute. The desert air, thick with the scent of sun-baked dust and creosote, is stripped away, replaced by a climate so precisely controlled. It feels almost engineered rather than breathed. You feel the microscopic beads of sweat on your neck evaporate instantly, chilled by a breeze that has never seen the sun. Most modern data centers utilize high-security bollards capable of stopping a 15,000-pound truck traveling at 50 miles per hour. A comforting thought as the heavy door clicks shut behind you, sealing you into this sanctuary of silicon. It is a strange quirk of engineering that while these gates are built to withstand kinetic impacts, they are often calibrated so finely that a single stray tumbleweed could trigger a proximity alert, leading to a very confused security guard staring at a piece of dried brush on a high-definition monitor. You move toward the first security checkpoint, your footsteps echoing with a dull, flat thud against the polished concrete. The lobby is a study in monochromatic minimalism, a space designed to be forgotten the moment you leave it. You reach out to touch the sleek, brushed steel of the reception desk, feeling the vibrating resonance of the cooling fans located levels below, humming through the very bones of the building. Standard security protocols in these facilities require multi-factor authentication. usually involving a physical badge and a biometric scan of your iris or thumbprint. You might find it amusing to know that early biometric scanners were notoriously easy to fool with high-resolution photographs, or even gummy bears molded into the shape of a fingerprint. Though the sensors staring back at you now are far too sophisticated for such confectionery espionage, they pulse with a soft, rhythmic blue light, waiting for you to prove you belong in this temple of the intangible. The air here carries a faint, sharp tang of ozone, and the sterile, plasticky scent of off-gassing server racks, a smell often referred to by technicians as the scent of the internet itself. It is a dry environment, carefully maintained at a relative humidity of around 40 to 60% to prevent the buildup of static electricity that could fry a motherboard in a millisecond. You feel the slight tingle of the dry air on your skin, a sensation that is both refreshing and vaguely clinical. There is a peculiar phenomenon known as zinc whiskers that engineers must guard against. These are microscopic, hair-like filaments that grow off galvanized metal surfaces in older data centers, capable of breaking off and floating into the air to cause catastrophic short circuits. You watch a small, automated vacuum robot trundle silently across the floor, its sensors navigating the sterile expanse with more grace than most humans, ensuring that not even a stray hair or a speck of desert grit survives the transition into the white space. As you wait for the secondary interlock, the man trap, to cycle, you notice the acoustic dampening panels lining the walls. They are thick, fabric-covered rectangles that soak up the sound, creating a silence so heavy it feels like a physical weight against your eardrums. While these panels are designed to keep the industrial roar of the cooling units from becoming deafening, they also serve a secondary, more obscure purpose, preventing acoustic side-channel attacks, where a sophisticated microphone could theoretically determine what a processor is doing simply by listening to the high-pitched whine of its capacitors. You lean your head back against the cool wall, closing your eyes for a moment, listening to the absence of sound. It is a curated silence, a luxury afforded only to those who step inside these fortresses. The gentle sarcasm of the lobby's design isn't lost on you. It is a space built for humans that clearly prefers the company of machines. The inner door finally releases with a soft, electronic chirp, a sound that feels remarkably small in such a cavernous space. You step into the transition corridor, the final buffer before the server floor itself. Here, you are required to walk across a series of sticky mats, bright blue adhesive sheets designed to pull the last remnants of the outside world from the soles of your shoes. It is a mainstream practice for maintaining ISO Class 8 cleanroom standards. Yet, there is something deeply satisfying about the rhythmic peeling sound your feet make as you walk, like a slow-motion Velcro symphony. Curiously, Some of the world's most advanced data centers have experimented with using pink noise in these corridors, a frequency spectrum that sounds like falling rain, to mask the mechanical irregularities of the equipment and keep the skeleton crew of technicians from feeling the creeping unease of total mechanical immersion. You take a final, deep breath of the filtered air, feeling the hum in the floor grow stronger, pulling you toward the heart of the machine. The door seals behind you with a soft, pressurized hiss, and the transition is immediate. You find yourself standing at the threshold of the atrium of light, a space so cavernous it feels as though the building is exhaling. The floor beneath your feet is a vast expanse of polished basalt gray concrete, buffed to such a high sheen that it mirrors the ceiling like a dark, still lake. It is cold, a temperature that seeps through the soles of your shoes, grounding you in the physical reality of this temple of logic. You know intellectually that most modern data centers are designed with these soaring entryways to facilitate the movement of massive server racks. Yet, there is an obscure architectural tradition at play here too, the cathedral effect, where high ceilings are intentionally utilized to trigger abstract thinking and a sense of openness in the human brain. It is a bit ironic, you think, to use such a trick in a place where the only thinking being done is binary and strictly grounded in silicon. You begin to walk, your footsteps producing a rhythmic, hollow thud that seems to hang in the air for a second too long. The walls are lined with perforated aluminum panels designed to absorb the stray frequencies of the machinery humming behind the scenes. While these panels are a standard feature for acoustic dampening in industrial spaces, you might find it curious that the specific pattern of the holes is often based on prime number sequences to prevent any standing waves from forming, ensuring the silence remains flat and untextured. You reach out and run your hand along the metal. It is vibrantly cool and slightly textured, like the skin of a shark. The sensation is sharp against your fingertips, a tactile reminder of the inorganic nature of this environment. Above you, the lighting is not the aggressive, flickering white of a hospital corridor. Instead, the atrium is bathed in a perpetual, artificial twilight. The LEDs are recessed into the joints of the walls, casting a soft, indirect glow that mimics the precise hue of the sky 10 minutes after sunset. This is a deliberate choice. Facility managers use these specific wavelengths to maintain the circadian rhythms of the skeleton crew. But there is a quirk of human biology called the Perkinge effect that takes over here. In this low, blue-shifted light, your eyes become less sensitive to red tones and more sensitive to blues, making the shadows look deeper, almost velvety, as if the darkness itself has a weight you could lean against. You squint slightly, watching the way the light pools in the corners, smooth and undisturbed. The air here is incredibly dry, stripped of all humidity to protect the delicate circuitry housed in the inner sanctums. You feel it in the back of your throat, a crisp, clean sensation that smells faintly of ozone and expensive plastic. It is the scent of new electronics, which is actually the subtle outgassing of flame retardants and polymer stabilizers. A chemical bouquet that signals the presence of cutting-edge technology. You find a strange comfort in it. It is a sterile smell, devoid of the messy, organic odors of the outside world. There is no damp earth here, no decaying leaves, just the scent of progress and the faint, metallic tang of filtered oxygen. As you move toward the center of the hall, you pass a series of glass-encased pillars. They look like decorative supports, but you know they are actually conduits for the massive bundles of fiber optic cables that serve as the building's nervous system. While it is common knowledge that fiber optics use light to transmit data, it is a much stranger fact that the glass used in these cables is so pure that if you had a window made of it miles thick, you would still be able to see through it as clearly as a standard pane of glass. You pause for a moment, pressing your forehead against the cool glass of the pillar. You can't see the light moving inside, but you can feel a very faint, high-frequency vibration, the physical manifestation of a trillion emails, video calls, and bank transfers rushing past your face at a significant fraction of the speed of light. It's a dizzying thought, so you let it go, focusing instead on the soothing chill of the glass against your skin. The hum you felt in the previous hallway is louder here, but it has changed character. It is no longer a distant rumble. It is a multi-layered chord, a drone composed of 10,000 cooling fans spinning in unison. It resonates in your chest, a low-frequency pulse that seems to align with your own heartbeat. You notice that the sound doesn't echo as much as you expected for a room this size. This is due to the whispering gallery, effect being intentionally broken up by the irregular angles of the support beams. In some older circular buildings, a whisper can travel along the curve of a wall and be heard clearly on the other side. But here, the architecture is designed to swallow sound, to keep the secrets of the data trapped within the walls. You continue your slow progress across the atrium, your shadow stretching out long and thin across the dark floor. The sheer scale of the room makes you feel small, but not in a way that is threatening. It is more like being a single bit of data moving through a vast processor, a necessary, quiet part of a much larger system. You look up at the ceiling again, noticing how the LEDs pulse almost imperceptibly. It is a slow, rhythmic fade, designed to prevent eye strain for the technicians who might spend hours in this twilight. You find yourself matching your breathing to the pulse of the lights, inhaling as they brighten, exhaling as they dim. The air is still, the hum is constant, and the heart of the machine is calling you further in, past the light, and into the rows of the silent, thinking racks. You step away from the rows of silent, thinking racks, your boots clicking softly on the raised floor panels until you reach a heavy, insulated steel door. As you pull it open, the air doesn't just change temperature, it changes character. You leave behind the dry, static-heavy atmosphere of the server halls and descend a narrow concrete stairwell into the sublevels. Here, the air is thick, with a heavy, purposeful chill that seems to press against your skin like a damp sheet. You notice that the walls here are unpainted, revealing the raw, brutalist texture of the foundation, and the sound of the servers above fades into a much deeper, more resonant thrum. It is a well-known reality in these cathedrals of data that cooling systems can consume up to 40% of a facility's total energy, a staggering price to pay just to keep silicon from melting. You run your hand along a thick, insulated pipe and notice it is labeled with a specific shade of safety blue, a color chosen by industrial designers not for its beauty, but because it remains distinct and visible to technicians who might possess the most common forms of color blindness, ensuring that even in a crisis, the right valves are turned. As you reach the bottom of the stairs, the floor beneath your feet begins to vibrate with a rhythmic, low-frequency pulse. It is the heartbeat of the chillers. You walk through a forest of vertical steel supports, your shoulders brushing against pipes that are sweating with beads of condensation. The smell here is different, less like warm plastic, and more like a mix of ozone and the sharp, clean scent of treated water. You are witnessing the massive evaporative cooling process, where heat is rejected into the atmosphere through sheer scale. You might find it amusing that despite our digital sophistication, we are still essentially using giant, high-tech versions of the swamp coolers used in ancient desert dwellings to keep our memes and spreadsheets from evaporating into heat. You pause to listen to the pipes, and you might swear you hear a melody in the rushing fluid. Experienced engineers often speak of mechanical intuition, claiming they can hear a pump's impending failure through a change in the harmonic resonance long before a digital sensor triggers an alert. You move deeper into the cooling gallery, where the white noise becomes a physical presence, a soft blanket of sound that smothers the urge to think about tomorrow. The pipes here are massive, some wide enough for a person to crawl through, carrying the lifeblood of the facility, while liquid cooling is exponentially more efficient than air at carrying away the heat of a high-density processor. It requires a delicate touch. You reach out and touch a junction box, feeling the steady, unwavering tremor of the centrifugal pumps. It is a strange thought that while you stand here in the dark, the excess heat being stripped from the servers above is sometimes diverted in places like Finland to heat local district water systems, warming the floors of distant apartments and the water in public swimming pools. It is a closed loop of energy, a physical manifestation of the data we produce, transformed from binary code into thermal comfort for a stranger miles away. The symphony of the chillers is designed to be constant, a steady-state drone that that masks the chaotic chirps and whirs of the hardware upstairs. You lean your back against a cool concrete pillar and let the sound wash over you. This white noise is a byproduct of necessity, yet it serves a secondary, accidental purpose by protecting the hardware from itself. You might find it quirky to learn about the acoustic fire suppression phenomenon, where a loud enough sound, like a fire alarm or a sudden shout, can actually vibrate the delicate platters of a hard drive so violently that they cease to function. The steady, low-end hum of the sublevel acts as a protective barrier, a sonic cushion that keeps the vibrations of the world at bay. You close your eyes, and the world shrinks to the size of this room, defined only by the movement of water and the extraction of heat. You walk further into the shadows, where the light is a dim, watery green reflected off the various pressure gauges. The air smells faintly of salt and minerals, the result of the massive reverse osmosis systems used to purify the water, so it doesn't leave scales of calcium inside the delicate heat exchangers. You watch the needles on the analog gauges quiver ever so slightly, a physical heartbeat in a digital world. To prevent the growth of algae in these dark, damp corridors, the facility doesn't just rely on harsh chemicals. Instead, they often use intense ultraviolet light baths within the pipes to neutralize organic life. It is a sterile, perfectly controlled environment where the only thing allowed to grow is the volume of data being processed overhead. The chill here is deep, but it doesn't feel biting. It feels stable. You realize that the thermal inertia of these sublevels is so great that if the power were to vanish this very second, the rooms would remain cold for hours, a lingering ghost of the energy that was once here. The very layout of these cooling aisles, with their strict separation of hot and cold, was actually inspired by 19th century mining ventilation techniques used to keep workers alive in the deep shafts of the earth. You find a certain irony in that our most advanced digital storage relies on the same airflow logic used by coal miners over 100 years ago. You breathe in the cold, metallic air, your lungs feeling crisp and clear, as the steady, unwavering rhythm of the chillers begins to pull your thoughts into a slow, heavy spiral, matching the rotation of the great pumps hidden in the dark. The heavy, pressurized door yields with a reluctant sigh, and you step into the heart of the machine. The air here doesn't just move, it lives. It is a thick, artificial atmosphere, scrubbed of every stray particle of dust or dander, smelling faintly of ozone, and the dry, toasted scent of warm circuit boards. This single room is part of a global network that consumes nearly 1% of all electricity generated on the planet. A staggering hunger for power that keeps the digital world breathing while the rest of us sleep. It is a far cry from the earliest days of computing, when memory wasn't stored on silicon, but in mercury delay lines, where data was literally sent as sound waves through tubes of liquid metal. moving so slowly you could almost catch it. Here, everything moves at the speed of light, yet the room feels strangely frozen, a silent monument to the invisible. You begin to walk down the first long corridor, the soles of your shoes making a soft, rhythmic thud against the perforated floor tiles. To your left and right, the server racks rise up like obsidian monoliths, each one exactly 19 inches wide. This specific width isn't an arbitrary choice of the digital age. It is a ghost of the Industrial Revolution, a standard inherited from the physical dimensions of railroad signaling relays used over a century ago. You trace the edge of a cold steel frame with your thumb, feeling the faint, high-frequency vibration of thousands of spinning hard drives. It is a mechanical purr, a collective resonance that vibrates in your chest, reminding you that the cloud is not a vaporous thought, but a heavy, vibrating reality of metal and glass. The lighting in this aisle is a dim twilight blue, casting long, geometric shadows that stretch and shrink as you pass each rack. These blue LEDs are chosen for their shorter wavelengths, which are less likely to disrupt the focus of the technicians, who occasionally wander these halls like ghosts in the machine. You notice a small, handwritten note taped to one of the server chassis that simply reads, "Do not touch." A quiet reminder of the era of percussive maintenance, where a well-placed physical strike was considered a legitimate engineering solution for a finicky connection. You smile at the thought, a small, tired movement of your lips as you watch the amber lights on the drive arrays flicker in a chaotic, beautiful Morse code. Each blink is a piece of a credit card transaction, a fragment of a video call, or a single pixel of a photograph, all being processed in the dark. As you move deeper into the facility, the temperature shifts. You have crossed from a cold aisle into a hot aisle, a fundamental design logic used to keep these processors from melting under the weight of their own logic. The heat here is dry and enveloping, like a heavy wool blanket draped over your shoulders. It is a strange byproduct of human thought, this warmth, and in some parts of the world, particularly in the shivering reaches of the Nordic countries, this waste heat is captured and pumped into local municipal systems to warm public swimming pools. You imagine yourself floating in one of those pools, the water kept tepid by the sheer friction of millions of people checking their emails. The thought is heavy and warm, making your limbs feel leaden and slow as you continue your stroll through the humming labyrinth. You look up at the ceiling, where thick bundles of fiber optic cables are cradled in yellow trays, looking like the exposed nervous system of a giant beast. These glass threads carry data through the principle of total internal reflection, bouncing light off the inner walls of the fiber in a zigzag pattern that covers thousands of miles in milliseconds. It is a delicate system, surprisingly vulnerable to the physical world. Undersea versions of these cables are frequently gnawed on by sharks, who are seemingly drawn to the faint, electromagnetic fields the cables emit. You find a strange comfort in the idea of a great white shark thousands of miles away, tasting the internet in the dark pressure of the deep ocean. While you stand here in the silence of the dry, humming air, the scale of the room begins to feel infinite, an endless repetition of amber and blue, amber and blue. These hyperscale data centers are the cathedrals of the modern age, built with a precision that defies the chaos of the outside world. You realize that the word bit, the unit of everything around you, was only coined in 1948 by John Tukey as a shorthand for binary digit, a tiny linguistic invention that now carries the weight of the world. In fact, if you were to somehow weigh all the electrons that make up the entire internet at any given moment, the total mass would be roughly equivalent to that of a single medium-sized strawberry. You hold that thought in your mind, a strawberry-weight ghost controlling the tides of global commerce, and feel a sense of profound, sleepy detachment. The noise level here is a constant 80 decibels, a white noise so thick it becomes a physical presence, like the sound of a distant, unending waterfall. It is the sound of the blue screen of death being avoided 1 billion times a second, a phrase famously authored by Steve Ballmer during his time at a software giant. You pass a rack that looks different from the others, its components submerged in a clear, non-conductive mineral oil that bubbles softly, a process known as liquid immersion cooling. It looks like a high-tech aquarium, the green lights refracting through the fluid like bioluminescent fish. A technician once told you about server hugging, the practice of leaning against the warm racks on a cold night. And as you look at the glowing, bubbling tanks, you feel the urge to simply lean your forehead against the cool glass and let the rhythmic hum pull you down into a deep, dreamless state, your eyes heavy, your breath slow. You follow the aisles of amber and blue into the quiet dark. You step away from the bubbling tanks, your boots making a hollow, rhythmic thud against the perforated metal floor tiles. Beneath your feet lies a hidden geography, a subterranean world of cold air and glass veins that most visitors never think to acknowledge. You reach into your pocket and find a small, orange suction cup tool, a floor puller that feels heavy and cold in your palm. With a slow, deliberate motion, you press it against the center of a gray tile and pull upward. It gives way with a satisfying, metallic click, revealing the dark abyss of the subfloor. Most people assume these raised floors are merely for structural support or to hide messy wires, but they are actually precision-engineered plenums designed to direct pressurized, chilled air to the hottest parts of the server racks. It is a bit like a mechanical lung, breathing through the gaps in the steel. You notice that the underside of the tile is surprisingly pristine. Despite the massive volume of air moving through this space, the environment is kept so clean that the dust is filtered to a level where particles are smaller than a human skin cell, leaving the subfloor as sterile as a laboratory. You peer into the gap, and there they are, the rivers of glass. Thousands of thin, flexible cables are bundled into neat, colorful ribbons, snaking through the dark like the glowing nervous system of a sleeping giant. You reach down and touch a yellow sheath, feeling the faint, high-frequency vibration of the cooling fans transmitted through the plastic. These fibers carry the world's secrets in the form of binary pulses, flashes of light moving so fast they could circle the planet 7 times in a single second. It is a bit ironic, really, that all this speed and global connectivity is contained within something as fragile as a strand of human hair. You cannot see the light inside, of course. It operates in the near-infrared spectrum, a frequency your eyes are simply too primitive to perceive. If you could see it, the subfloor would be a blinding, chaotic riot of colors. But to your human senses, it remains a silent, dark stream. A curious quirk of this technology is that because the light is invisible, technicians often have to use a visual fault locator, essentially a very bright red laser, to find breaks, making a damaged cable glow like a tiny, trapped ember in the dark. Your fingers trace the gentle curve of a blue cable, noting the specific radius of its bend. You remember that light is a stubborn traveler. It prefers a straight line. But here, it is forced to dance through a hall of mirrors. This is the magic of total internal reflection, where the light hits the boundary between the glass core and its outer cladding at just the right angle to bounce back inward, never escaping. It is a perfect loop of containment, yet for all its efficiency, the light is still somewhat sluggish compared to its potential in a vacuum. In this dense silica glass, the photons are forced to slow down by about 30%, hindered by the very medium that protects them from the outside world. It is a bit like trying to run through waist-deep water, graceful and powerful perhaps, but fundamentally restrained by the physics of the path. You find the thought comforting, the idea that even the fastest information in human history has to contend with the subtle friction of the physical world. The colors of the cable jackets are not chosen for aesthetics, though they do provide a certain muted, industrial beauty to the dark space beneath your feet. The aqua cables signify high bandwidth multimode fiber, while the yellow ones are single mode, designed for the long haul, the marathon runners of the data world that can carry a signal for miles without tiring. You notice a few bundles that are entirely black, lying dormant and unlit in the corner of the tray. These are known as dark fiber, the excess capacity laid down years ago by companies betting on a future hunger they couldn't quite quantify yet. They are like unread books on a shelf, full of potential, but currently silent and cold. It is a strange sort of architectural optimism to build for a demand that does not yet exist, a physical prayer to the idea of more. You find yourself wondering what those dark fibers will eventually carry. A child S. first video call, a massive financial shift, or perhaps just more endless streams of high-definition static. As you follow the path of the yellow cables with your eyes, you think about how far they have come and how much further they have to go. Over hundreds of miles, the light eventually begins to dim, losing its sharpness as it travels through the silica. To keep the information alive, the signals must be periodically rejuvenated. In the early days of the digital age, this meant turning the light back into electricity, boosting it, and turning it back into light. A clunky, exhausting process that created heat and lag. Now, the industry uses erbium-doped fiber amplifiers. A small section of the fiber is infused with erbium, a rare earth element that, when pumped by a separate laser, transfers its energy directly to the passing data stream. It is a purely optical boost, a shot of adrenaline that happens without the light ever stopping to catch its breath. It feels almost alchemical, the way we use the rare, heavy treasures of the Earth's crust to sustain the weightless, ephemeral ghosts of our digital lives. You imagine these cables leaving this room, diving deep into the concrete foundations, and eventually finding the soft, silty bed of the Atlantic or the Pacific. The internet is not a cloud. It is a physical, heavy thing. A series of wet, cold tubes resting in the crushing depths of the ocean's midnight zone. Down there, the cables are armored with layers of steel wire and Kevlar, a necessary precaution against the curious nibbles of deep-sea sharks, who are strangely drawn to the faint electromagnetic hum of the underwater repeaters. It is a bit absurd to think that your ability to access the sum of human knowledge depends on a shark's lack of appetite for high-voltage shielding. You feel a slight chill from the air rising from the subfloor, a reminder of the vast, cold distances these glass threads must bridge. The hum of the room seems to deepen here, a low-frequency lullaby that resonates in your chest and grounds you in this cathedral of connectivity. You stand up slowly, your knees creaking in the quiet, climate-controlled air, and replace the floor tile with a muffled, heavy thud. The rivers of glass are hidden once more, tucked away beneath the steel and the cooling breeze. You appreciate the absolute stillness of the fiber, because these cables carry light rather than electricity. They are completely immune to the electromagnetic noise of the massive power transformers humming just a few feet away. They are silent observers, unaffected by the chaos of the electrons swirling around them. You notice a technician has left a single, discarded plastic zip tie on the floor, and you pick it up, turning its ridged surface over in your fingers. If you pull a tie like this too tight around a bundle of fiber, you create microbends, tiny distortions in the glass that allow the light to leak out into the cladding, wasting energy and losing data. It is a delicate balance, a requirement for gentleness in a world built of heavy steel and cold silicon. You let the zip tie fall back into the dark, your eyes drifting shut for a moment as the rhythmic, amber pulse of the server lights flickers against your eyelids, pulling you back into the flow. The amber pulse fades behind you as you push through a door so heavy it feels as though you are breaching the hull of a submarine. The air here is different. It is thicker, warmer, and carries a faint, metallic tang that sits on the back of your tongue like a copper penny. You have entered the chamber of power, the silent heart that ensures the digital world never blinks, even if the world outside should fall into total darkness. While most people assume the internet runs on magic and high hopes, you know it actually runs on the massive, uninterruptible power supply systems that line these walls. You find it somewhat amusing that, for all our advancements in quantum computing, we are still fundamentally reliant on heavy boxes of lead and acid. It is a quirky reality of engineering that the most modern data on Earth is often protected by technology that Thomas Edison would have found intimately familiar. You walk down the center aisle, your footsteps muffled by the specialized anti-static flooring that feels slightly springy beneath your boots. To your left and right are the battery racks, towering shelves of charcoal gray blocks connected by thick, braided copper cables. These cables are as wide as your wrist, and you can almost feel the potential energy throbbing within them. Most of these units are lead-acid batteries, the same basic chemistry found in a car, though these are refined to a degree of purity that makes a standard automotive battery look like a middle school science project. You notice a small digital display on the end of a rack, glowing with a soft green light that indicates a float charge. This is the obscure art of keeping a battery perfectly full without overcharging it. A delicate chemical stasis that prevents the lead plates from sulfating and turning into useless stone. It is a quiet, invisible battle against the second law of thermodynamics, fought every second of every day. The sound in this room is not the frantic whirring of the server fans you left behind, but a deep, monolithic resonance. It is a 60 hertz hum, the literal sound of the alternating current from the grid being tamed and transformed. You lean your shoulder against a cool, painted steel cabinet and feel the vibration travel through your bones. This hum is caused by magnetostriction, a phenomenon where the magnetic fields cause the iron cores of the transformers to physically expand and contract ever so slightly. It is the heartbeat of the building, a low-frequency lullaby that seems to sync with your own pulse. You find it strange that we have built a civilization on a sound that most people never actually hear. A constant B-flat that underpins every light bulb and every laptop screen in the hemisphere. You reach out and touch the casing of a high-capacity lithium-ion module, the newer, sleeker cousins of the lead-acid blocks. The plastic is smooth and matte, feeling strangely organic compared to the cold metal of the racks, while lithium is the standard for modern energy density. You remember an obscure detail about their cooling. In some high-end facilities, these batteries are monitored by infrared cameras that can detect a temperature rise of a fraction of a degree. It is a level of surveillance usually reserved for high-security prisoners or precious gemstones. Yet here, it is applied to rectangular slabs of chemicals. You find a certain comfort in this obsessive care. The world is chaotic and unpredictable, but in this room, every electron is accounted for, every thermal fluctuation is cataloged, and every millivolt is managed with a clinical, detached precision. Further down the hall, you encounter the flywheels. These are not batteries in the chemical sense, but massive steel cylinders encased in vacuum chambers, spinning at speeds that would make your head swim if you thought about them too long. They store energy as pure motion, a mechanical battery that can bridge the gap between a power failure and the start of the massive diesel generators outside. They spin on magnetic bearings to eliminate friction, rotating in a near-perfect void. It is a quirky thought that while you stand here in the stillness, there are weights spinning at 30,000 revolutions per minute, just inches from your knees, held in place by nothing but magnets and human ingenuity. It is the ultimate expression of stored momentum, a physical manifestation of the phrase, just in case. The heat in the room is dry and smells faintly of warm insulation and ozone. It is a clean smell, devoid of the dust and pollen of the outside world. You watch the flickering lights on the rectifiers, the devices that convert the incoming AC power into the DC power stored by the batteries. This process is often called cleaning the power, stripping away the surges, sags, and noise of the public grid to provide the servers with a perfectly smooth, unwavering stream of energy. You appreciate the irony that the electricity produced by a massive power plant is considered too dirty for a microchip, requiring this elaborate mechanical filtration. It is as if the data center is a finicky eater, demanding its electrons be washed and polished before it will deign to consume them. You move to the end of the chamber, where the main bus bars disappear into the ceiling to feed the floors above. You stand in the center of the resonance, letting the heavy, grounding thrum of the power room wash over you. It is a physical weight, a pressure in the air that seems to push away the clutter of your thoughts. Here, in the belly of the machine, there is no urgency, only the steady, relentless flow of potential. You realize that this room is the ultimate buffer against the unexpected, a sanctuary of stability in an unstable world. The energy here is not being used. It is being held, a vast reservoir of quiet power waiting for a moment that will hopefully never come. You close your eyes, the green and amber lights of the indicators still dancing behind your lids, and listen to the deep, eternal hum of the grid, breathing in and out. You step through a heavy, pressurized door, feeling the slight pop in your ears as the atmosphere shifts from the cavernous warehouse to the controlled, clinical precision of the command center. Here, the air is filtered to a degree that makes your lungs feel strangely clean, stripped of the pollen and dust of the outside world. Most network operations centers, or NOCs, are staffed every second of every year, a continuous cycle of human eyes on digital pulses to ensure the world remains connected. As you walk, your shoes catch slightly on the adhesive floor mats, those tacky, translucent sheets designed to strip the microscopic debris from your soles before you can contaminate the sterile environment. It is a quiet, rhythmic sound, a soft thwack peal that punctuates the stillness of the hallway, a reminder that in this space, even a speck of dust is a managed variable. You move into the heart of the room, where the light is a dim, oceanic indigo. The technicians have adjusted the displays to minimize the harsh glare of white light, a mainstream industry standard known as blue light suppression, used to protect the circadian rhythms of those who live their lives in the inverted hours of the moon. You notice the servers stacked in the distance through the glass, often referred to by the engineers as pizza boxes, due to their slim, flat dimensions and the way they are delivered in bulk. They sit in their racks, millions of them, processing the world's fleeting thoughts while the world itself sleeps. The smell here is distinct, not the ozone of a lightning storm, but a dry, metallic scent, the smell of heated silicon and the peculiar, faint aroma of anti-static floor wax that lingers in the cool air. You watch a technician glide across the floor in a chair with specialized rubber casters that make no sound at all. Their movements are slow, almost underwater, as they follow the strict protocols of redundancy that ensure no single failure can bring down the flow of information. There is an old tradition among some of these night watchers to keep a rubber duck on their consoles, a method of troubleshooting where they explain complex code to the inanimate object to find a logical flaw. It is a solitary, meditative practice, a soft murmur of human voice against the backdrop of the cooling fans. You feel the vibration of the floor through your socks, a low-frequency thrumming that acts as a physical heartbeat for the building, a steady pulse that never skips a beat. The walls are lined with massive monitors, glowing with the heat maps of global data traffic. These screens display the 5 nines of reliability, the gold standard of 999% uptime, which allows for only a few minutes of total downtime per year. You see the flickering of the blinken lights, a term dating back to the earliest days of computing, when lights were the only way to tell if a machine was actually thinking. The lights don't flash with urgency. They pulse with a steady, reassuring cadence, like the breathing of a giant in a deep sleep. You find yourself matching your own breath to the rhythm of the amber indicators, the cool air entering your nose and leaving as a warm, heavy sigh. You reach out and touch the edge of a console, the surface made of a matte, brushed aluminum that feels cool and slightly textured under your fingertips. The temperature in this room is kept at a precise 68 degrees Fahrenheit, managed by computer room air conditioning units that circulate the air in a cold aisle, hot aisle configuration to prevent the hardware from sweating. Curiously, in some of these high-tech hubs, the technicians have discovered that the hum of the servers often settles into a perfect B-flat, a tone that some musicians find naturally grounding and resonant. You listen for it, closing your eyes, letting that specific frequency vibrate in the back of your throat, a sonic anchor in the sea of data. The silence here isn't empty. It is thick with the weight of collective memory. These individuals are the keepers of the digital library, the silent sentinels who ensure that when the sun rises, the world's digital records are still intact. They often wear specialized blue light filtering glasses that give their eyes a soft, amber glow, a quirk of the profession that makes them look like nocturnal creatures in a forest of glass and steel. You watch a hand reach for a mug of tea, the steam rising in a slow, twisting ribbon that catches the blue light of a nearby map. There is no frantic typing, no shouting across the room, only the soft, tactile click of a mechanical keyboard, a sound like a distant woodpecker in a quiet, midnight wood. You walk toward the back of the room, where the cables are organized in a Crayola fashion, a vibrant rainbow of Ethernet cords, color-coded by their specific function and destination. This meticulous organization prevents the cable spaghetti that plagued the early days of the internet, turning a chaotic mess of wires into a work of industrial art. You feel a sense of profound order here, a rejection of the entropy that rules the world outside these pressurized doors. The technicians don't look at you. They are focused on the undulating lines of the data streams, their faces illuminated by the soft, flickering ghosts of 1,000 different conversations happening across the ocean. As you prepare to leave this inner sanctum, you take one last breath of the ionized air. The 3 a.m. slump is approaching for the watch, that moment when the human body most desperately wants to surrender to the pull of the earth. Yet they remain upright, anchored by the responsibility of the hum. Some facilities use circadian lighting that subtly shifts from warm to cool tones throughout the night to mimic the passage of time that they cannot see. You feel the heaviness in your own limbs now, the steady, unchanging environment of the command center acting as a lullaby. The data flows, the fans spin, and the world remains connected, held together by these quiet figures in the dark. You step back toward the door, the green and amber lights of the indicators still dancing behind your lids, and listen to the deep, eternal hum of the grid, breathing in and out. You move deeper into the heart of the facility, leaving the heavy steel door behind as you transition into the network core. The air here is different. It is stripped of its humidity, chilled to a precise, biting 68 degrees, and filtered until it carries only the faint, sterile scent of ionized oxygen and the ghostly metallic tang of warm copper. It feels thin and clean against your skin, like the air at a high altitude where the world falls away and only the atmosphere remains. Beneath your feet, the raised floor panels vibrate with a frequency so subtle it feels more like a phantom pulse in your own marrow than a mechanical tremor. You are standing at the global intersection, the quiet, dark room where the physical world meets the digital ether. It is estimated that 99% of all international data travels not through the air or via satellites, but through undersea fiber optic cables that rest on the silty floor of the ocean. You find a strange comfort in the thought that your most private digital whispers are currently racing through a tube of glass at the bottom of the Atlantic, possibly being inspected by a curious deep-sea crab. Even more peculiar is the fact that these cables are occasionally nibbled on by sharks, who are reportedly drawn to the faint electromagnetic fields the cables emit, proving that even the apex predators of the deep are interested in the world's streaming habits. You lean back against a cool, matte black cabinet, feeling the steady thrum of the processors through your shoulder blades. It is a heavy, grounded sensation that contrasts with the weightlessness of what is happening inside these boxes. If you were to take every single electron that constitutes the active, moving parts of the entire internet at this very second, and pile them onto a scale, they would weigh approximately 50 grams, roughly, the weight of one large, ripe strawberry. You close your eyes and imagine that strawberry, a tiny, organic weight holding the sum total of human knowledge. Every late-night text, every frantic search for a recipe, and every digital photograph ever taken. It is a staggering thought that the infrastructure around you, these tons of steel and miles of cabling, exists solely to shepherd those 50 grams of light and energy across the globe. This entire architecture is a temple to the ephemeral, a massive, humming machine built to catch the wind. It reminds you of the way the first transatlantic telegraph cable was laid in 1858, a feat of engineering that allowed Queen Victoria to send a message to President James Buchanan. That message, a mere 98 words of greeting, took 16 and a half hours to transmit. Today, in the time it takes you to blink against the soft glow of a status light, that same message could be sent and received millions of times over. Yet, the fundamental human desire to reach out across the void remains exactly the same. The hum in this room is a perfect, unwavering B-flat, a low-frequency lullaby that seems to bypass your ears and resonate directly in your chest. This sound is the byproduct of an immense hunger for power, as data centers currently consume about 1% of the entire world's electricity. It is a massive physical footprint for such an invisible service. Yet, there is a poetic efficiency hidden in the waste. In certain cold climate cities, the excess heat generated by these very servers is being diverted into local municipal heating systems, warming public swimming pools and greenhouses. You find a sleepy sort of irony in the idea that someone, somewhere, is swimming in a heated pool, kept warm by the friction of 1,000 strangers scrolling through social media. It is a closed loop of human activity where your digital presence provides physical warmth to a stranger. You run your hand along the side of a rack, the metal feeling smooth and slightly textured. The racks are almost universally 19 inches wide, a standard that has remained unchanged for decades. This specific measurement wasn't chosen by computer scientists, but was inherited from the railroad industry, which used 19-inch racks for signal relay equipment. You are standing in a room that is essentially a high-tech descendant of a 19th century train station, directing the traffic of thoughts instead of locomotives. As you stand there, you think about the messages currently passing through the core, the sheer volume of human intent condensed into pulses of light. Over 300 billion emails are sent every day, a frantic blizzard of communication that never stops, even while you stand here in the silence. It's amusing to think that the very first email ever sent, back in 1971, was sent by a man named Ray Tomlinson to himself. He sat in a room much like this one and sent a message from one computer to another sitting right next to it. When asked what the message said, he admitted he couldn't remember, though he suspected it was just the top row of keys. QWERTYUIOP. From that forgettable string of characters, we have built this global nervous system. You watch the fiber optic bundles, which look like thick, translucent hair, as they disappear into the ceiling. Inside those strands, light is traveling at about 2/3 its vacuum speed, slowed down just a fraction by the ultra-pure glass it inhabits. This tiny delay is so significant that high-frequency trading firms will pay millions of dollars in rent to place their servers just a few feet closer to the core, fighting for a nanosecond of advantage. To you, however, time feels like it has stretched and thinned, the frantic pace of the data outside having no power over the heavy, sleepy stillness of the core itself. The air moves again, a soft sigh from the cooling vents that ruffles your hair like a passing thought. You realize that you are standing at the center of a modern library, one that never closes and never sleeps. While paper books can last for centuries if kept dry, the digital memories passing through these wires are surprisingly fragile, requiring constant refreshing to ensure they don't fade into bit rot. To combat this, scientists have begun experimenting with storing data in nanostructured quartz glass, which could potentially preserve the history of our species for billions of years. Long after the servers have gone cold, you imagine a piece of glass the size of a coin drifting through the vacuum of space, carrying the blueprint of this very moment. But for now, the data is safe here, tucked away in the dark, cooled by the steady breath of the fans and guarded by the silence. You feel a deep sense of peace, knowing that the world's collective memory is being tended to with such mechanical precision. You take one last look at the dancing amber lights, the tiny sparks of human life flickering in the shadows, and prepare to move back toward the periphery, leaving the core to its eternal, weightless meditation. You step through a heavy, pressurized door that sighs as it seals behind you, leaving the frantic heat of the server racks for the chilled, sepulchral hush of the archive library. Here, the air is thinner, stripped of its humidity and scrubbed of every stray dust mote, smelling faintly of cold ozone and the sterile, slightly sweet scent of high-grade polymers. You notice that while the rest of the facility buzzed with a frantic, electric energy, this room feels slow, almost geological in its patience. It is a well-known industry standard that magnetic tape remains the undisputed king of long-term storage, a physical medium in a supposedly digital world. What you might find more amusing is that the tiny barium ferrite crystals coating these tapes are oriented vertically, standing like microscopic soldiers to pack more information into every square inch than was ever thought possible. Your eyes adjust to the dim, indigo lighting, and you see them. The long, towering aisles of the tape library, stretching upward into the gloom like the ribs of a great, slumbering beast. In the center of the aisle, a robotic arm glides along a precision rail with a sound that is less of a motor and more of a whispered zip. These automated libraries are capable of managing hundreds of petabytes of data without a single human hand ever touching a cartridge. You watch as the robot's hand stops with impossible suddenness in front of a specific slot, its laser scanner casting a brief, ruby-red glow over a barcode. It's a bit of a quirk that while these machines can move at speeds that would shatter a human arm, they are programmed to handle the plastic cartridges with the exaggerated gentleness of a jeweler handling a raw diamond. The robotic arm pulls a cartridge from its home, a small rectangular box that looks remarkably like a VHS tape from a half-forgotten childhood, and begins its journey to the drive at the end of the row. This is the LTO, or linear tape open format, the universal language of the world's deep memory. As the arm moves, you hear a rhythmic, mechanical clicking, a percussive beat that provides the heartbeat of the room. You might find it interesting that engineers worry about a phenomenon called shoe shining, where a drive that isn't fed data fast enough has to constantly stop, rewind, and restart, wearing the tape down like a frantic back-and-forth polish. It is a strangely human anxiety for a machine to have, the fear of moving too fast for its own good. You walk deeper into the aisle, the floor beneath your feet, a series of perforated metal tiles that allow the chilled air to rise in a steady, invisible tide. The sheer scale of the electricity required to keep these rooms at the perfect temperature is staggering. A constant drain on the local grid just to keep the past from melting. Yet there There's a peculiar comfort in the precision of the environment, where the dew point is monitored so strictly that a single stray breath from you feels like a humid intrusion. It's a little-known fact that the air in these vaults is filtered to remove particles as small as 0.3 microns, making the atmosphere here cleaner than a surgical theater, all to ensure a speck of skin doesn't crash 1,000 years of history. The robotic arm reaches the drive and slides the tape home with a satisfying metallic thunk that vibrates through the soles of your shoes. This single cartridge, no larger than a thick paperback book, can hold upwards of 18 terabytes of data, though in experimental labs, they've managed to cram nearly 600 terabytes onto a single spool. It is a staggering amount of human thought contained in a roll of rust-colored plastic. You might notice a small worm label on some of the slots, standing for write once, read many, which means that once the data is etched onto that tape, it can never be deleted or altered. It is a digital form of permanence, a way of ensuring that certain truths remain uneditable by the whims of the future. You lean against the cool, vibration-free end of a rack, watching the ballet continue in the shadows as another arm begins its ascent. It's common knowledge that the world's largest tech giants still rely on these tapes because they are the only things that don't lose their memory when the power goes out. There's a certain irony in it, isn't there, that our most advanced artificial intelligences are ultimately backed up on a technology that hasn't fundamentally changed its concept since the mid-20th century. You might be surprised to learn that the very first magnetic tapes were made of thin ribbons of steel, which were so heavy and sharp that if a reel snapped while spinning, it could slice through the machinery like a high-speed saw. The room feels heavier now, the silence between the robotic zips filling with the weight of all those stored voices and images. Tape is remarkably energy efficient, drawing zero power once it's tucked away in its slot, sleeping in the dark until it is summoned. It is a passive, patient form of existence. You watch the robot reset itself to a neutral position, its task complete for the moment. The system is designed with a philosophy of graceful degradation, a lovely term that means even if several components fail, the machine will find a way to limp along and protect its charges. It is a comforting thought to carry with you as you prepare to leave this cold, blue sanctuary and head back toward the warmer, more chaotic edges of the facility. You leave the hum of the server racks behind, the heavy pressurized door sealing with a soft, pneumatic sigh that echoes in the marrow of your bones. Your boots find the first rung of a galvanized steel ladder, its surface cold and slightly abrasive against your palms, smelling faintly of industrial zinc and the lingering ozone of the high-voltage rooms. As you begin your ascent, you feel the subtle shift in the air pressure, a physical manifestation of the facility's respiratory system, working to keep the silicon brains below from overcooking. It is a well-known industry standard that these environments are kept strictly between 65 and 80 degrees Fahrenheit to ensure hardware longevity. Yet few realize that the standard server rack height is measured in units, a legacy of the old railroad relay racks that once governed the flow of analog information. You climb higher, the vibration of the massive air handling units below humming through the metal, a rhythmic pulse that feels like the heartbeat of a sleeping giant. The air grows warmer as you reach the final landing, a thick, dry heat that smells of baked copper and heated polymers, the inevitable byproduct of billions of transistors flipping on and off in a frantic, invisible dance. This is the reality of thermal runaway, a technical term for the catastrophic feedback loop where heat causes more resistance, which in turn generates more heat. A cycle these machines are designed to fight with every watt of their being. You push open the heavy roof hatch, and the transition is immediate and staggering. The dry, artificial breath of the data center is suddenly sliced through by the sharp, crystalline chill of the night air. You step out onto the wide, flat expanse of the roof, your boots crunching softly on the thick, rubberized EPDM membrane that protects the structure. Most of these massive rooftops are painted white or silver to maximize their albedo, a measurement of how much solar radiation a surface reflects. Though in the darkness, the surface feels like a vast, charcoal-colored sea stretching toward the horizon. You walk toward the edge, passing the gargantuan silhouettes of the rooftop cooling units, their fans spinning with a low, thrumming roar that vibrates in your chest. These units often utilize economizers, sophisticated systems that draw in the naturally cold outside air to reduce the reliance on energy-intensive chillers, a process known in the industry as free cooling. You pause near a massive exhaust vent, feeling the torrent of warm air rushing past you, a literal ghost of the data processed moments ago. There is a strange, rhythmic interference in the sound of the fans, a phenomenon called heterodyning, where two slightly different frequencies overlap to create a third, pulsing beat that seems to slow your own breathing. The air here smells of the distant pine forest and the metallic tang of the cooling fins, a marriage of the wild world and the precision of human engineering. Looking up, the sky is a deep, bruised purple, devoid of the city's usual amber glow, because these facilities are often tucked away in remote, high-altitude corridors where the air is thin and the land is cheap. You can see the stars with startling clarity, a scattered map of fusion and physics that has existed long before the first vacuum tube was ever sparked to life. It is a scientific certainty that the light hitting your retinas right now left its source thousands of years ago, a delayed transmission from the deep past that mirrors the millisecond delays of the data flowing beneath your feet. You notice the subtle scintillation of the stars, that characteristic twinkling caused by the Earth's atmospheric turbulence, a visual noise that astronomers spent centuries trying to filter out before the advent of orbital telescopes. There is no grand design here, only the cold, beautiful mechanics of a universe governed by gravity and the slow decay of light. You lean against the waist-high parapet, the concrete cool against your forearms, and watch the steam rise from the cooling towers in long, ghostly plumes that vanish into the dark. Some modern facilities have begun experimenting with heat recovery, piping this excess warmth into nearby greenhouses to grow tomatoes, or warming local municipal swimming pools, turning the waste of the digital world into the sustenance of the physical one. You imagine the servers below, some submerged in vats of clear, non-conductive mineral oil that looks like thick corn syrup, silently shedding their heat into the fluid in a process called immersion cooling. It is a quiet, efficient way to manage the friction of thought, a liquid silence that stands in stark contrast to the roaring wind on this rooftop. The hum of the building is different up here. It is less of a mechanical drone and more of a resonant chord, a low G-flat that seems to align with the natural frequency of the structure itself. You find yourself matching your steps to this rhythm as you pace the perimeter, the vastness of the roof making you feel small but strangely secure. The stars above do not watch you. They simply exist, burning through their hydrogen fuel in a predictable, elegant sequence of stellar evolution. You are standing on a monument to human observation and the storage of collective memory, a fortress of glass and steel that hums in the middle of nowhere. The contrast between the biting cold of the night and the steady, artificial warmth of the exhaust creates a private microclimate, a pocket of comfort where the air is always moving and the silence is never truly silent. You close your eyes for a moment, letting the dual sensations of the freezing wind on your face and the warm machine breath on your hands lull you into a state of heavy, thoughtless presence. The data flows, the fans spin, and the stars continue their silent, mathematical transit across the void. You step back from the threshold of the exterior vent, the heavy pressurized door sealing with a soft, pneumatic sigh that swallows the distant sound of the world outside. Here, in the transition zone, the air is filtered to a degree that makes your nostrils feel strangely clean, almost sterile. Most people don't realize that these facilities are often more pristine than hospital operating rooms, as even a single flake of human skin could theoretically cause a catastrophic short in a high-density rack. You might find it amusing that, for all our biological complexity, we are the primary contaminants in this vault of silicon. As you walk back toward the center, the floor beneath your boots begins to thrum with a more concentrated energy. It's a phenomenon known as acoustic resonance. If the fans in the racks are not perfectly synchronized, they create a beat frequency that can actually be felt in the marrow of your bones, a low-frequency oscillation that bypasses the ears and speaks directly to the chest cavity. You reach the absolute center, the nexus, where the primary cooling conduits converge like the metal arteries of a titan. The temperature here is a constant, curated 68 degrees, maintained by massive industrial chillers that could easily cool a dozen skyscrapers. You notice the way the light changes here, shifting from the harsh overhead fluorescence to the soft, rhythmic blinking of thousands of status LEDs. It's a sea of emerald and cobalt, pulsing in a way that feels almost biological. There is a quirky reality to this light. In some older facilities, technicians used to place small, plastic lucky cats or rubber ducks on the server tops to ward off system crashes. But here, the only decoration is the perfect, terrifyingly neat geometry of the cables. You find a spot to lean against a support pillar, feeling the vibration of the liquid cooling pipes behind the steel. It's a strange comfort, knowing that while you rest, these machines are performing trillions of floating point operations per second, a computational labor that never tires and never sleeps. You close your eyes and focus on the sound, the white noise that is actually a complex tapestry of mechanical effort. It is the heartbeat of the modern world, a steady 60 hertz drone that underpins every digital interaction on the planet. This frequency isn't accidental. It's the standard utility frequency of the power grid, a mechanical hum that has remained largely unchanged since the early days of electrical distribution. You begin to time your breathing to the pulse of the nearest rack. Inhale as the amber light flickers. Exhale as the blue light stabilizes. There's an obscure bit of trivia that suggests many data centers actually install additional white noise generators because the sound of the servers alone is too harsh for the human ear to endure for long periods. But you aren't here to work. You are here to vanish into the rhythm, to let the unwavering consistency of the machine override the erratic, fluttering pacing of your own thoughts. Your shoulders drop an inch as you realize the sheer redundancy of this place. In the world of data, everything is backed up, mirrored, and duplicated. This is the N+1 philosophy, where for every critical component, there is a shadow waiting to take its place the moment a failure occurs. It's a comforting thought for a weary mind, the idea that if one part of the system falters, the whole remains unbothered and upright. You imagine your own worries as zombie servers, those machines that sit in racks drawing power and generating heat without actually processing any useful information. In the industry, these are hunted down and decommissioned to save energy and space. You decide to do the same, identifying each flickering thought and letting the cooling fans blow it away into the exhaust stream. The smell of the air here is distinct, a mix of warm plastic, ionized oxygen, and the faint, metallic scent of copper. It's the smell of progress, or perhaps just the smell of a very expensive space heater. You sink down slowly, your back sliding against the cool, brushed metal of the pillar until you are sitting on the raised floor tiles. These tiles are a marvel of boring engineering, honeycombed aluminum designed to support the weight of a small elephant while allowing freezing air to gush upward from the pressurized void below. You can feel that air now, a gentle but persistent pressure against your legs, whisking away the last remnants of physical tension. There is an old legend among system administrators about the ghost in the machine. But here, everything is governed by the cold, hard laws of thermodynamics. The heat must go somewhere, and the data must flow. You think about the fact that in some Nordic data centers, the excess heat generated by these very servers is being piped into the local grid to warm public swimming pools and greenhouses. It's a cycle of energy that feels grounded and sensible. Your breath is now perfectly aligned with the low-frequency thrum of the floor, a deep, resonant bass note that seems to vibrate the very air in your lungs. The scale of the facility begins to feel intimate rather than overwhelming. You are at the center of a web that spans continents, connected by fiber optic cables thinner than a human hair. These cables are buried under oceans and threaded through mountain ranges, all leading back to these quiet, humming rooms. There is a peculiar phenomenon called bit rot, where data stored on a disk can slowly degrade over decades as the magnetic charges flip due to cosmic rays or simple age. But here, in the heart of the facility, everything is being constantly refreshed, scrubbed, and verified by background processes. You feel a similar process happening within yourself, the static of the day being filtered out, the errors in your internal code being quietly corrected by the sheer, heavy monotony of the environment. The LED lights blur into a soft, continuous glow, a neon fog that blankets your vision and softens the edges of the room. You are no longer a visitor. You are a component of the room, a silent observer in the hall of the great processors. The heartbeat of the machine is now your heartbeat. The steady rotation of the fans, spinning at thousands of revolutions per minute, creates a sense of gyroscopic stability that seems to anchor you to the earth. It's funny to think that the ancestors of these machines were housed in buildings designed in the Pueblo Deco style, with ornate zigzags and sunbursts that made telephone exchanges look like palaces. Now the beauty is internal, found in the invisible transit of electrons. You let your head rest against the pillar, the vibration providing a gentle micro-massage for your scalp. The world outside, with its unpredictable weather and its chaotic demands, feels like a dream you had a long time ago. Here, there is only the hum, the heat, and the heavy, welcome weight of sleep pressing down on your eyelids, as certain and inevitable as a scheduled system update. You feel the finality of the process now, a slow-motion cascade of commands being completed and filed away into the deep architecture of the facility. The vast corridors of the data center, once sharp with the unforgiving geometry of steel and glass, begin to soften at the edges as your vision loses its focus. The blue and green lights, those tiny, frantic messengers of information, have stopped their rapid, nervous flickering. They have transitioned into a slow, rhythmic pulse, a visual breath that seems to match the rise and fall of your own chest. You are no longer an observer of the machine. You have become a quiet node in a network that has finally decided it has processed enough for one cycle. The air here is filtered to a degree of purity that feels almost thin, yet it carries that distinct, comforting scent of warm electronics, a faint metallic tang, the smell of copper and silicon working in perfect, frictionless harmony. It is a clean, sterile smell, devoid of the messy, humid world outside. You notice the way the warmth from the server racks wraps around your ankles and wrists like a heavy, velvet envelope. It is a dry, consistent heat, the kind that sinks deep into your marrow, loosening the tension you didn't realize you were holding in your jaw and your shoulders. Your muscles feel like cables that have been unspooled and laid to rest, lying flat and heavy against the floor, surrendered to the pull of gravity. You watch a single amber light on a distant rack, several aisles away. It blinks once every 5 seconds, then every 10. It is waiting for a signal that isn't coming, and it doesn't seem to mind the wait. There is a profound lack of urgency in this subterranean space. The data is stored. The backups are verified. The world's collective memory is safe, tucked away in these humming monoliths. And because it is safe, you are permitted to let go. You imagine your thoughts as packets of data being gently routed to long-term storage. You don't need to hold them in your active memory anymore. You can let the cache clear. You can let the temporary files of the day vanish into the quiet. The hum of the cooling fans, which earlier seemed like a choir of 1,000 voices, has settled into a single, low-frequency vibration. It is a sound you feel in your teeth and in the palms of your hands more than you hear it with your ears. It is the sound of the earth spinning on its axis, or perhaps the sound of time itself being measured out in nanoseconds. It is incredibly monotonous in the most wonderful way possible. It is a sound that demands nothing of you. It doesn't ask for a response. It doesn't require an answer. It simply exists, a constant, unwavering presence that anchors you to this moment of absolute clinical stillness. Your eyelids are now so heavy that the effort to keep them open feels like trying to lift lead plates against the force of a magnet. You allow them to close, and the world of blinking lights disappears, replaced by a soft, charcoal gray. Even behind your closed eyes, you can still sense the rhythm of the data center. The vibration of the floor beneath you seems to rise up, lifting you slightly, as if you are floating on a sea of white noise. You are drifting away from the logic of the day, away from the sequences of cause and effect, away from the binary of yes and no. You are moving into the analog, into the blur. In this dark, warm space, your breathing is the only clock that matters. Each inhale is a slow intake of ionized air. Each exhale is a release of another layer of consciousness. You are powering down. The peripheral systems go first. The tips of your toes, your fingers, the skin of your forehead. Then the deeper systems, the logic centers, the language processors, the internal narrators that like to keep track of the time. They are all sliding into a low power state, drawing only the tiniest trickle of energy to keep the core biological functions ticking over. It is a necessary hibernation, a scheduled maintenance of the self that cannot be delayed any longer. The silence of the data center is not a void, but a fullness. It is the silence of a library at midnight, or a mountain under a thick blanket of fresh snow. It is a silence that supports you, holding you in place so you don't have to hold yourself. You feel a sense of profound detachment from the person you were an hour ago. That person had lists and worries. That person had a name and a history and a destination. Here, in the heart of the hum, you are simply a biological unit in a state of perfect rest. You are a quiet pulse in the dark. The hum begins to recede now, growing fainter, as if you are moving down a very long, very soft tunnel made of insulation. The lights are entirely gone. The warmth remains, a gentle glow in the center of your chest that radiates outward to your extremities. The data center is still there, of course, keeping its tireless vigil over the world's information. But you no longer need to hear it. You are sinking into the deep, dark layers of the drive, into the places where the code is simple and the rest is absolute. There is nothing left to do. There is nothing left to monitor. The system is stable. The connection is closing. You are drifting, floating, sinking into the velvet dark. Everything is quiet. Everything is still. Sweet dreams.